Imagine you are trapped inside a steel box, 30 tons of American engineering, surrounded by the humid, claustrophobic darkness of the Iwo Jima jungle. Suddenly, the rhythmic thud of your diesel engine is drowned out by the scraping of boots on your hull. Through the narrow vision slits, you see nothing, but you hear the frantic clink of metal. A Japanese suicide squad is boarding your tank. They aren't using anti-tank guns. They are using crowbars to pry open your hatches and magnetic mines to turn your sanctuary into a furnace. To stop this nightmare, the U.S. Marines didn't look to the factories in Detroit. They looked to the scrap heap. They began welding 3.5-inch construction spikes to their steel skin, creating porcupine tanks that made boarding a death sentence. But as you will see, this desperate survival tactic nearly destroyed the very machines it was meant to save. By 1944, the Pacific Theater had devolved into a feedback loop of unprecedented terror. The Japanese military, fueled by the belief that collective sacrifice would triumph over American material abundance, had perfected the art of close quarters anti-tank warfare. While the European theaters saw massive tank-on-tank engagements like the Battle of Kursk, the Pacific was a war of invisibility. The M4 Sherman, a marvel of panzer, crushing engineering, was now operating in terrain where its 75mm gun was often useless. The U.S. Marines of the 4th and 5th Tank Battalions found themselves facing an enemy that did not fear death, but embraced it. The Japanese Nikuhaku squads, literally human bullets, would hide in spider holes, wait for the Sherman to pass, and then spring onto the rear decks. Their objective was simple: reach the hatches, drop a satchel charge inside, or attach a Type 99 magnetic mine to the thinnest part of the armor. This created a strategic crisis. Why was the world's most advanced medium tank so vulnerable to a single man with a magnet? The answer lay in the Sherman's design, which was never built to fight an enemy that would physically climb it like a predator. What happened next would change the course of battlefield improvisation forever. The Marines quickly realized that standard military doctrine had no answer for a boarding party. To survive, the crews began a program of hillbilly armor that would have horrified the engineers back home. They started by welding large wood planks, often 2x12 oak, to the sides of the hull. The goal was to create a standoff space when a Japanese soldier tried to slap a magnetic mine onto the tank. The wood prevented the magnet from sticking to the steel, but the Japanese adapted, using adhesive charges and lunge mines. The tension escalated during the nights on Iwo Jima. You must understand the sensory deprivation of the tank commander. The noise inside a Sherman was already well over 150 decibels during combat, making it impossible to hear the enemy creeping onto your deck. The Marines responded by turning their tanks into concrete bunkers. They poured a layer of cement, sometimes 4 inches thick, over the wooden planks. On top of this, they embedded thousands of 3.5-inch construction spikes, pointing outward. These porcupine tanks were designed so that no human being could find a handhold or a place to sit. But here is where the dread sets in. How much weight can a tank take before it breaks itself? The Sherman was already a heavy beast, but the addition of oak, concrete, and thousands of steel nails added upwards of 3 to 5 tons of dead weight. This improvised armor was a double-edged sword. While it provided a physical barrier against suicide squads, it placed a catastrophic mechanical strain on the Sherman's vertical volute spring suspension, VVSS. The engines began to overheat in the tropical sun, and the transmissions, already strained by the mud, started to fail with alarming frequency. The crews were trading their mobility for a few more hours of life. The emotional peak of this desperation was reached during the Battle of Okinawa. Japanese suicide attacks reached a fever pitch, with thousands of civilians and soldiers being coerced into death before surrender. For the tank crews, the porcupine modification was no longer an option. It was a requirement for sanity. One commander recalled the horror of seeing the spikes on his tank covered in the remains of an enemy squad the morning after a night attack. The awe of the invention was inseparable from the dread of its utility. This was the moment the U.S. Navy and Army High Command had to face a hard truth. Their superior machinery was failing the human beings inside it. The Porcupine wasn't just a tank. It was a physical manifestation of the Marines' fear of an unstoppable enemy spirit. The mechanical failure rate of the 5th Tank Battalion skyrocketed. Tanks would lose their tracks in the middle of a firefight because the suspension simply couldn't hold the weight of the concrete and spikes. You are watching a machine literally crushing its own legs to keep its heart beating. In these moments, the invincible American industrial might felt fragile, held together by nails and desperation. The porcupine tanks eventually did their job. They blunted the effectiveness of the Nikuhaku squads, forcing the Japanese to rely on heavy artillery, which was increasingly rare as the islands fell. When the war ended, the spiked Shermans were stripped of their hillbilly armor, and many were dumped into the ocean or scrapped. But the legacy of the porcupine did not die in 1945. This historical moment created the blueprint for every modern conflict involving asymmetrical warfare. We see the DNA of the porcupine tanks in the slat armor, used on strikers in Iraq to pre-detonate RPGs. Most strikingly, we see it today in the cope cages, or top attack shields being welded to tanks in modern European conflicts, just as the Marines used nails to stop a man with a mine. modern soldiers are using steel mesh to stop loitering drones. History has a haunting way of repeating its geometry. The physics of ricochet fire and standoff distance, perfected by Vauban in 1688, are the same physics being used by a tanker in 2024. The story of the Porcupine tanks is a reminder that in the heat of battle, innovation isn't always about high-tech lasers or AI. Sometimes, it's about a box of 3.5-inch nails and the will to survive the night. It highlights the eternal struggle between the engineer in the factory and the soldier in the mud. Was the trade-off worth it? Was the loss of mechanical reliability a fair price for protection against a human wave attack? Let us know in the comments. If you were in that Sherman, would you have trusted the armor or the spikes? Subscribe to Epic Battles Hubs for more investigations into the improvised genius of history's greatest warriors. In the end, the most powerful weapon on any battlefield isn't made of steel. It is the human mind's refusal to be defeated.